for the first time in man's history, it is now realistic to think in global terms about improving man's condition. The fact that mankind now can rid this planet of ignorance and hunger is one of the most awesome bits of knowledge that we live with.
Headlong advances in knowledge and technology bring new and not fully understood dimensions to man's world. Ancient problems and truths remain. The responsibility of men and nations to live in peace in a shrinking world is more urgent today than in all history combined. The President's activities during October would emphasize the new dimensions of the 20th century world community. Today's compact world demands the awareness of all men that liberty must be mutually protected. Colonel Robin Olds serves as a new breed of world citizen and patriot. He commanded a tactical fighter wing operating out of Thailand to protect a struggling young nation 10,000 miles away called Vietnam. For some 25 years, Colonel Olds has protected many men and nations from the tyranny of other men and nations. On October 2nd, he reported to President Lyndon B. Johnson that liberty is as much worth the fight today as it was at Valley Forge. Another American offers his thoughts to further his people's historic concept of freedom in a world of rapid change. President Johnson met this unusual American, dock worker, philosopher, writer, for the first time on October 4th. Eric Hoffer's message is as timely as the space age. Its validity was known to the ancient philosophers. Despite the stress of changing civilization, men must strive to mutually realize their full human potential in a world of order, harmony, and moderation. Part of the story to improve man's condition was seen a day earlier, when President Johnson signed the Vocational Rehabilitation Act amendments of 1967. In some 50 years, this program has helped rehabilitate over 2 million Americans, lifting them from a life of mere existence as society's dependent to a productive life as society's participant. Within the last 4 years alone, 1/4 of that total, 500,000 Americans, have been helped. To continue to help the American people, the Johnson administration has vastly expanded and improved such programs of human rehabilitation. Critics point a frugal finger at rising government expenditures and decry the cost of new programs. President Johnson's reply that day was, "For every tax dollar invested to help the handicapped, 5 are returned. The human enrichment is beyond measure." He also spoke of the need for rehabilitation from other handicaps that afflict Americans.
The handicap of ignorance, for example. Mental handicaps are another. The handicap of poverty is another. Rehabilitation, in fact, has become a basic idea in our country. We act on the belief that every man, no matter what his color, no matter what his bank account, no matter what his handicap, no matter what his IQ, has abilities which America needs. That is a new idea, but it's a great idea. It's like discovering a new country right in our midst, the territory of human promise.
For 35 years, the Federal Home Loan Bank System has been a guardian of the nation's economic health. Its over 5,000 members safeguard 42 million savings and loan accounts and finance some 44% of America's home ownership. Meeting the officers and leading personnel of the system on October 6th, President Johnson noted that an unmatched gross national product, the highest personal income, wages, and business profits in history, and millions of new homes, jobs, and commodities for a growing population are tributes to American free enterprise. However, fluctuations such as the 1966 period of tight money remain to be avoided or abated. That jolt prevented construction of 500,000 new homes and cost home buyers an extra $2.5 billion in mortgage payments. The President also emphasized the need for Congress and the people to understand and approve a tax request of 1 cent per dollar, to prevent a threatening inflationary spiral. President Johnson reminded the group that America's economic system is a model for other countries. It is also the source of the nation's strength, world leadership, and abilities to bring new qualities into American society. Keeping that economy vigorous, overcoming human problems at home, and carrying out our promises abroad are continuing responsibilities inherent in world leadership. President Johnson made clear that his administration would not turn from those responsibilities.
I know it's not a popular thing for a president to do, to ask anyone for a penny out of a dollar to pay for a war that's not popular either. And if I were concerned only with my own popularity or my own poll, that wouldn't be the way I would go about it, to suggest higher taxes. But you have to do what's responsible, and you have to do what's right if you sit in this place.
At Southwestern University in Texas, Mrs. Johnson spoke of added responsibilities for those who learn and preserve the wisdom of the past. She reminded her audience of the need today to look beyond their own borders in sharing the benefits of their knowledge. The First Lady urged their greater involvement in the shrinking world of the 20th century. People-to-people communication, Mrs. Johnson said, is a mutually beneficial ingredient in building a better world.
Today's graduate may just as likely be a Peace Corps volunteer, a builder in Jakarta or Dahomey, a Methodist minister in Vietnam. When the wife of our ambassador helps run an orphanage in Recife, Brazil, when a businessman's wife organizes an adult education center in Chad, a special kind of communication takes place. American open-heartedness and hospitality are good diplomacy, often as good as official messages and formal state visits. All over the world, Americans are making that clear. I've met some of them. Businessmen in Bangkok, school teachers working with educational television in Pongo Pongo, Peace Corps volunteers in the Philippines. I suppose our country will always have its criticism, even some extremes and excesses. We always have. But throughout our history, another force has always been stronger in our land. Not the spirit which destroys, but the spirit which builds.
In her role as the nation's official hostess, the First Lady's contribution toward creating a White House atmosphere conducive to friendly and reasonable discussions is perhaps matched only by her active understanding of America's new role in history.
When John and Abigail Adams, the first occupants of the White House, lived there, ours was a brand new republic. Washington was a tiny, shaky, courageous little capital in a mud hole of a town with very few friends in the world. There were fewer than half a dozen foreign missions accredited to the United States. Today, that number has grown to 110.
As Chief of State, President Johnson last year met 30 times on African problems, 24 times on Latin American affairs, 70 times on European problems, 11 times on Middle East, and held 128 personal ambassadorial appointments. The pace is even greater this year.
In the past 12 months alone, 36 kings, presidents, and prime ministers have visited our country. No one can live in the White House and meet the parade of visitors from around the world without realizing how greatly our responsibilities have grown and how much our world has been shrinking.
International involvements today extend into the universe itself. International understanding and accommodation under color of law is more urgent than ever before. A step in that direction was taken in the East Room of the White House on October 10th.
It is my pleasure on behalf of the Soviet government to deposit today the instruments of ratification of the first in history international treaty of principles governing the activities of states in the exploration and use of outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies. We hope that it will contribute to the settlement of major international problems still facing the mankind on our planet.
With this ceremony today, and with the parallel ceremonies taking place in London and Moscow, the Outer Space Treaty, which was opened for signature on the 27th of January of this year, enters into force.
The treaty calls for cooperation in the conduct of scientific studies, for consultation concerning experiments that may have potential harmful effects, assisting and returning astronauts and space vehicles, opening installations on the moon and other celestial bodies to visits by astronauts of all countries, reporting to the United Nations on the nature, conduct, location, and results of space activities.
I see it as a hopeful sign that mankind is learning, however slowly, that wars are not inevitable, that national rivalry is not a permanent barrier to international understanding, and that a world of hostility and a world of hate need not be the abiding condition of mankind.
The reality of the 20th century is that men and nations do attempt to exploit human misery. With the help of free world allies, South Vietnam is fighting for its very existence as a free nation. Freedom's progress in Southeast Asia would be seen on the last day of October. War-torn South Vietnam would inaugurate her first freely elected government. On October 25th, President Johnson personally awarded the Medal of Honor to Marine Corps Major Howard V. Lee, who risked his life to help bring about that progress.
The American commitment is clear. It was given clear and eloquent voice by a young American, a fighting man, who wrote from Vietnam, and I quote him, "We are fighting for the freedom of these people as we once fought for our own. We all take pride in fighting for the principles that made our country the greatest on earth. And when our grandchildren read about Vietnam and the history lessons, we shall be proud to tell them that we were a part of that lesson. The existence of liberty in America depends on the courage and the perseverance of men like Major Lee and his brothers in arms. Their willingness to risk their lives for liberty is what preserves it for their countrymen."
Possibly both men pondered events 4 days earlier. Some 25,000 peace marchers protested America's commitment to freedom for South Vietnam. A remarkable American whose foresight and perseverance brought America's strength and promise directly into the 20th century was honored on October 27. He brought on himself the contumely of his contemporaries. He refused to falter. His only sorrow was for those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat, and who can only stand outside the arena and criticize the doer of deeds.
The giants of American history have always spoken beyond their own times to all generations. Theodore Roosevelt was such a giant. He challenged our people to build, not just for themselves, but for their children, not just for private gain, but always for the public good. He urged that the responsibilities of citizenship always be manfully met. I do not know what his response would be to the specific problems of our decade, But we do know that it would not be the easy answer if he believed the hard answer was the right one.
The October 26th arrival of President and Mrs. Gustavo Diaz Ordaz began concluding ceremonies for a unique treaty, the peaceful settlement of a border dispute between two proud nations. The territory involved was not great, but was important to both countries. The event was a hallmark in the history of diplomacy.
Our success as friends and neighbors rests on respect for each other's rights. We regard diversity as a healthy condition within nations and among neighbors. We approach whatever differences arise in a spirit of compromise and goodwill. And because the United States and Mexico practice these precepts, our relations today are closer than they have ever been in the history of our two republics.
I express my great satisfaction in stepping on the soil of this great nation, the first one on this continent to obtain its liberty. And I bring with me the expression of friendship of our people for the United States.
The spirit of reason, understanding, and goodwill between two major democracies produced a meaningful lesson for the world. A festering border problem was ended. Mutual respect and friendship was enhanced. Following the legal protocols, Presidents Johnson and Ordaz engaged in friendly and searching talks on hemispheric and world problems. The friendship of the presidents, their governments, and their people would be colorfully demonstrated in Juarez, Mexico on October 28th.
For almost a century, the word chamizal stood for dispute and disagreement between the United States and Mexico. Yet in the last 4 years, it has become for both of our peoples an inspiring symbol of friendship and mutual respect. An old argument has ended. Let this monument and this place stand as testimony to the world of what two nations working together can accomplish. Too many times the world has seen disputed boundaries changed through force. El Chamizal stands as a shining example of how such matters should be settled. For the last half-century, each president of the United States has faced the moral issue of America's commitment to the Chamizal Convention of 1910. In that treaty, we agreed that the decision of the Arbitral Commission, quote, shall be final and conclusive upon both governments and without appeal. This is the final act of a long drama It is a fulfillment possible only to those who respect the rights of others and so ensure their own. That is the real message of El Chamizal.